If you boot up Super Mario 64 and walk past this enemy, the Chain Chomp, you'll hear an iconic sound effect. But listen to what happens when I walk past that same enemy in the Japanese version of the game. It sounds totally different. Why do Chain Chomps sound so different in Japan? Well, that's not the only mystery. Did you know about the Smash Bros song that reveals a hidden melody when you slow it down? Or how about the Mario and Zelda songs hidden within Pikmin 4? In this video, we'll be exploring some of my favourite Nintendo musical secrets and mysteries. I've really dug for this video, and by the end of it, you won't hear some of these songs the same way you did before. Let's explore some Nintendo music secrets. Number 1. First, let's talk about the Super Smash Bros. Series. Now, beginning in Smash Bros. Brawl, each fighter has a final smash, a powerful move that turns the match on its head. These final smashes are often iconic, and I want to focus on one in particular, Princess Peach's. Now, the specifics of the move aren't really important. Instead, focus on the music that plays during Peach's final smash. Does it sound familiar? Let me slow it way down. Does it sound familiar now? For comparison, let me play you the Coin Heaven theme from Super Mario Bros. 3. These two themes are exactly the same. In other words, Peach's final smash contains this hard-to-spot homage to a classic NES Mario game. And as a final note, in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Princess Daisy was added as an Echo Fighter of Peach, which means she has similar attacks and a similar final smash, which also contains the same musical Easter egg. Number 2. Next, let's talk about New Super Mario Bros. U. For the first time in the New Super Mario Bros. Series, this game features an interconnected overworld. The grasslands lead right into the desert and so on. And because of this, the game's composers came up with one single overworld theme, which adapts to each individual zone. Take a listen to how it changes. Except, there's one area that doesn't follow that rule, and that's the final area of the main story, the castle. Normally, the final area of a Mario game would be Bowser's castle, and would have some kind of Bowsery music playing. But in New Super Mario Bros. U, Bowser takes over Peach's castle instead and turns it evil. And take a listen to the music that plays when you enter this area. Sound familiar? It's an evil-sounding remix of Peach's castle theme from Super Mario 64. Mario U's composers saw that Bowser took over the castle and decided to put together this evil-sounding remix as a clever homage to that fact. Number 3. Now, while we're talking about Mario World maps, I want to touch on a subtle little Easter egg found inside another Mario game's world map, that being New Super Mario Bros. Wii and World 9. Now, this is the final world of the game, a kind of bonus set of levels, and take a listen to the background music from this map screen. Sound familiar? it's a pretty subtle reference, but compare the World 9 theme to Rainbow Road from Mario Kart 64. There's actually only 5 notes in common between these two songs. Here they are on the piano, and then in the two Mario themes. So this is a very subtle but unmistakable musical reference to one of Mario Kart's most iconic melodies. Number 4. It was in 2021 that Super Nintendo World, a Nintendo-themed area inside Universal Studios Japan, made its grand opening. 3 years later, there's a second location in California, with another 2 in the works in Florida and Singapore as well. And these Nintendo World theme parks are full of really cool remixes of iconic Mario music. Like when you're queuing up to ride Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge, a real-life take on Mario Kart, you'll hear a remix of the song that plays while you're selecting your course, character, and kart type in Mario Kart Wii. But my favourite musical reference in the park is a lot simpler, and it's found in the bathroom or toilet areas. Take a listen to this song, which plays while you use the loo and wash your hands. Sound familiar? It's actually the underwater theme from New Super Mario Bros. Wii, U, and 2. Using this water-level soundtrack in a bathroom of all places just really makes me laugh. And the remix is like 10 minutes long too, so spend as much time as you need going to the toilet, because you'll have a catchy and fitting soundtrack to hum along to. Number 5. Next, let's talk about Pikmin 4. Now, in this game, you, the player, must collect hundreds of treasures, as they're known, in order to power your spaceship and return home. And there are so many treasures to find in Pikmin 4, more than in the previous 3 Pikmin games combined. There's jigsaw puzzle pieces, playing cards, Russian dolls, tubes of paint, video game consoles, and musical instruments. Now, there's 13 different musical instruments in total, but there's 3 I want to focus on, these 3 music boxes. You see, these music boxes hide a neat secret. When your Pikmin are carrying them back to the ship, the boxes start to play music out loud. Each of the 3 plays a different tune. The first one sounds like this. If you don't recognize that, it's the Pikmin 3 title theme. Then there's the second music box. That one plays Piranha Plant's Lullaby from Super Mario 64. And finally, we have the third and final music box. And this one plays the Song of Storms from Zelda Ocarina of Time. When I first noticed these music boxes and the songs they play, I couldn't believe what a cool reference this really is. Number 6. Next, I want to talk about the Mario Kart series, and more specifically, this piece of music. This is the title screen theme from Super Mario Kart. Now, the game's soundtrack was written by composer Soyo Oka, and this Mario Kart motif is one of the greatest accomplishments of the whole soundtrack. Because, if you didn't notice, that motif is featured in almost every Mario Kart title screen theme, even if it's a little hidden or hard to notice. Here it is in Mario Kart 64, played at a slower tempo. Then Double Dash, Mario Kart DS, Mario Kart Wii, Mario Kart 7, and of course, Mario Kart 8. In fact, excluding the arcade Mario Kart games, there's only 3 entries in the Mario Kart series that do not include the iconic Mario Kart motif on their title screens: Mario Kart Tour, Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, and Mario Kart Super Circuit for the GBA. Super Circuit's title theme does actually bear a strong similarity to the iconic main theme, but it's not an exact match. Still, that's 7 out of 11 total games, all of which include the Mario Kart motif that Soya Oka composed way back in 1992. I imagine she must feel pretty pleased, knowing that the theme she wrote is still the first thing players hear whenever they boot up a Mario Kart game. Number 7. Now, while we're talking about Super Mario Kart, there's another interesting story about the game's audio. So, Super Mario Kart's sound team consisted of 2 people: Soya Oka, the game's composer, and Taro Bando, the game's sound engineer. It was Bando who was in charge of taking Soya Oka's compositions and coding them into the game. Plus, Bando was also in charge of all of the game's sound effects, including the sound that the karts themselves make when players are driving them. And this driving sound hides an interesting secret. You see, halfway through Super Mario Kart's development, the game's developers convinced producer Shigeru Miyamoto to let them visit a real-life go-kart racetrack. It was called Nemu no Sato, located in Japan's Mie Prefecture. While they were there, the game's developers rode around in go-karts on this go-kart racetrack with the goal of improving their game's physics. But sound programmer Taro Bando had another goal. Normally, in video games and movies, you don't record the actual sounds that match what's happening. If a character is walking around in the snow, you might press some shoes down into a sand pit, for instance, because it often sounds better than actual snow and it's easier to record. That's called Foley, and it's common across games, movies, and TV shows. But with the Mario Kart team visiting this racetrack and trying out real go-karts, this was a golden opportunity for Taro Bando, who packed up his microphone and took it with him on the trip. And according to composer Soya Oka, the engine sounds were collected from karts on an actual circuit. That job was left to Bando-san. And so when you play Super Mario Kart, the kart sounds you're hearing weren't created with a synthesizer, and they're not Foley either. They're recordings of actual go-karts that the game's developers rode around in. And that's a pretty cool and pretty obscure fact about Super Mario Kart. Number 8. While we're talking about composer Soya Oka, let's talk about another soundtrack she composed. So I really love the original Pilot Wings game. I think this game is so charming, and the music in particular is a high point. And throughout a couple of songs on the game's soundtrack, you can hear a unique vocal sound. Here it is isolated from the rest of the song. Now, I've long wondered where this vocal sound comes from. Did composer Soya Oka record it herself? Is it from some old keyboard or synthesizer? It's a bit of a mystery. While hard-working synthesizer sleuths have identified almost every instrument from this soundtrack and exactly where their audio samples originated from, that vocal sound alone has remained a mystery. And so I figured if one person on Earth knows, it's Soya Oka herself. So I got into contact with her. To be honest, I really was not expecting a reply. This is an absurdly specific query about a soundtrack she composed over 30 years ago. But to my shock, Soyoroka did indeed reply to my message. In fact, we exchanged a couple of emails trying to get to the bottom of the mystery. However, it turns out this is as much a mystery to her as it is to me. And that's because Soyoroka wasn't actually the person behind this unique sound. She told me, Pilot Wings was originally supposed to be handled by Kondo-san, my senior. To be clear, that's Koji Kondo Soyoroka's talking about. I remember that Kondo-san was the one who sampled the tones, so I'm sorry, I don't remember the synthesizer that Kondo-san used. She went on to explain that human voice-like tones were common on synthesizers of the era. So in other words, Pilot Wings' unique vocal instrument wasn't a recording of Soyoroka or Koji Kondo's own voice. It came from a synthesizer. Soyoroka couldn't remember which synth exactly Koji Kondo used, so I went digging. But though I listened to hundreds and hundreds of different instrument patches from synthesizers and keyboards used in the Pilot Wings and Super Mario World soundtracks, I never found a perfect match. I did, however, find quite a few similar vocal instruments. Take a listen. So, I'm afraid that's as close as we're gonna get for now when it comes to solving this mystery. Koji Kondo picked out a similar sound to one of the ones I played and sampled it to use in the Pilot Wings soundtrack. And when he left the project to go work on another game, Soyoroka, who took over, made good use of this unique vocal instrument. Number 9. Next, let's talk about Chain Chomps, one of my favourite Mario enemies. Now, if you didn't know, these enemies were inspired by a childhood experience of Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto. When he was young, a huge, scary dog ran up to him, barking. Only the dog's chain prevented it from biting young Miyamoto. Years later, while working on Super Mario Bros. 3, this memory provided the inspiration for a new enemy, called Wan Wan, which is the Japanese equivalent of Woof Woof. When Mario 3 was translated into English, the enemies were renamed Chain Chomps, and the rest is history. Originally, those Chain Chomps didn't make any kind of sound, but when Mario made the jump to 3D with Super Mario 64, all kinds of previously silent enemies were given voices for the first time, including the Chain Chomps. Now, I'm sure you're long familiar with the classic Chain Chomp barking sound, which sounds like this. I can't find exactly where this sound originates, but it's clearly a recording of a real dog. But if you were a Japanese player of Super Mario 64, then that barking sound wouldn't sound so familiar, because Chain Chomps sound totally different in the original Japanese release. It sounds less like a dog and more like a human voice. Potentially, it could be a recording of the game's sound designer, a man named Yoji Inagaki. But why did Inagaki use a human voice instead of an actual dog sound? Well, Nintendo themselves haven't talked about this, but the most likely theory that I've come across is that the sound is supposed to emulate that Japanese barking onomatopoeia, wan wan. Now, it certainly doesn't sound like Inagaki just sat in front of a microphone and spoke the words wan wan. It's more abstract than that. But I certainly do hear a certain amount of resemblance to the Japanese barking onomatopoeia. But of course, for international players who have no idea what wan wan even means, the original Chain Chomp sound is more than a little mystifying. And while Japanese players know that this enemy is meant to be dog-like, based on the name wan wan, us international players wouldn't necessarily get that dog association from the English name Chain Chomp. So, before the game's release in the US, that original Chain Chomp voice clip was swapped out for a more realistic sounding dog bark. It's a good example of how little cultural things we take for granted, like woof woof or wan wan, can have interesting impacts on everything, including Mario games. And there we have it. Those are 9 of my favourite Nintendo musical Easter eggs and mysteries. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to support more videos like this, then consider signing up to my Patreon. Patrons get all kinds of fun bonus content, like extra videos each month, regular behind-the-scenes updates, access to the Thomas Game Docs Discord server, plus you're helping me make videos like this. If you do want to help out, you can do it at patreon.com/ThomasGameDocs. And as always, an extra special thanks to my $10 patrons: Alison Withernall, Brett and Derek, Candy Crystal, Casey Cotreau, Cyprian Eov, Daryl Jero, Ellie Birnbaum, Evan Kinney, Fallen AJ, I Need Togepi, Jason Hughes, J.E., Jim Gilsonan, Kieran Chan, Kelly Wright, Lucas Little, Michael Gunter, Michael JHD, Skator Pie, and Thomas Söderlund.